I told myself it was just a role. A client dinner. A hotel ballroom. A dress that cost more than I usually spend in 6 months. And a fake smile I'd mastered long ago. I could be the charming wife, the poised professional, the woman who always knew what to say. But the moment I stepped into that mirror-lit elevator, something shifted. The ring on my finger felt heavier than usual. Not just gold, but a promise. A version of me. The good woman. The loyal one. The one who always said no. I stared at my reflection as the elevator doors closed. My lipstick was darker than I meant it to be. My dress tighter than I remembered. The red fabric hugged me like it had an opinion. And I saw her, the woman I used to be. Or maybe the one I'd buried under calendars, meal plans, and polite smiles. I reached up almost without thinking. Slipped the ring off. Just for tonight. Just so I could breathe. The ballroom was humming with music and wine. Laughter bounced off the high ceilings like perfume. Everything glowed. Chandeliers, crystal glasses, eyes that lingered a second too long. I was supposed to network. Shake hands. Smile. But then I saw him. At the bar. Leaning back slightly, drink in hand. Eyes scanning the room with quiet precision. He wasn't trying to be noticed, and that's exactly why I noticed. When our eyes met, it was like I'd forgotten how to breathe. He didn't smile. Just looked. Like he'd already decided something about me. I turned away too quickly. Told myself it was nothing. Just a stranger. But my skin was already reacting. Heat pulsing at the base of my neck. And that ring still tucked inside my clutch. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But deep down I knew. The night had already started changing me. I tried to lose him in the crowd. Made polite conversation with a woman from HR. Laughed at a joke I didn't hear, sipped a cocktail that tasted like guilt. But his gaze had already touched me. And something inside me had shifted, tilted like a picture frame no one bothers to straighten. I kept catching myself scanning the room. Looking for the man I wasn't supposed to be thinking about. And then he was just there. Closer than I expected. Leaning beside me at the bar, ordering something dark. He didn't look at me right away. Just stood there like gravity was on his side. Like the air knew to move around him. When he finally turned, his voice was smooth, almost amused. "Is your husband here tonight?" The question hit harder than it should have. "I'm here alone," I said. Too quickly. Too rehearsed. My voice came out softer than I meant. And I hated how much I meant it. He smiled slow. Not smug. Just knowing. "You don't look like you usually are." I almost laughed. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "Something about your eyes. You're watching the room like it's watching you back." I didn't know how to respond, so I sipped my drink instead. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was charged. Like something waiting to be touched. "Do you always talk like that to strangers?" I asked. "Only when they look like they need to be reminded they're still wanted." His words settled between my ribs like heat. There it was, that pull. Not just to him. But to me, the woman I used to be. The one who felt things. Who didn't filter every word through responsibility. He didn't touch me. Didn't lean in. He just let his presence do the work. And somehow that was worse. Or better. I couldn't tell anymore. I felt reckless. And alive. And the ring in my purse started to feel more like a weight than a promise. I stayed. Just a little longer. Long enough for his voice to wrap around me like velvet. Long enough to forget, on purpose, who I was supposed to be. And that was the moment I knew. This night had already gone too far to stop. I don't remember deciding to leave the party. One minute I was still at the bar. His words still echoing inside me like a hum I couldn't silence. The next I was in the hallway outside the ballroom. Heels clicking on marble floors. Breath catching in my throat. He didn't ask if he could follow. He just did. And I didn't stop him. We walked in silence down the long hotel corridor. Lit low and red. Like the night itself had secrets it wasn't ready to tell. My reflection flickered in the gold-framed mirrors along the wall. I didn't recognize her. And that terrified me and thrilled me. When I turned around, he was still there. A few steps behind. Watching. Not rushing. Like he knew I needed to decide this. Like he wasn't here to chase me. Only to meet me if I kept walking. At the elevators I hesitated. My finger hovered over the button. He stepped closer. Still no touch. Still no promises. But his voice was a whisper now. Like we were already in a room with the lights low. You sure you want to do this? I turned to face him. My heart was slamming so hard I could barely hear my own breath. I'm not sure of anything right now, I said. That's the problem. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I meant to say. Then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I reached into my clutch and opened my hand. The ring sat in my palm, gleaming under the hallway light. Quiet, accusing. And without looking at him, I slid it into the little side pocket, deep enough that I wouldn't feel it anymore. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened, and he followed me in. The silence inside was thick, the kind that wraps around your skin and waits. He didn't move toward me. Not yet. But I could feel him. Every molecule of me was aware of his presence. Like gravity was pulling only in his direction. And when the doors closed, trapping us in that small space of breath and tension, I didn't feel married, or responsible, or good. I felt wanted. And for the first time in years, I wanted back. The elevator hummed as it climbed, steady and different. Not like my pulse, which had lost all sense of rhythm. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. Because I knew if I did, the fragile thread of self-control I'd been clinging to would snap. When the doors opened on the 9th floor, I stepped out without a word. I didn't ask if he'd follow. I didn't need to. Room 924. I still remember the number like a secret etched into my skin. The key card trembled slightly in my hand as I slid it into the lock. The green light blinked, and the door opened with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than my conscience. The room was dim, lit only by the soft spill of the hallway before the door shut behind us. The curtains were already drawn. The city outside gone. Just me. And him. And the hush of a space waiting to be filled with something it didn't dare name. I walked in slowly like every step might change my life. He stayed by the door at first, quiet still. Like he was waiting for me to speak the language we'd been whispering with our eyes all night. I don't do this, I said finally. My voice barely carried. I don't even know who I am right now. He stepped forward one slow, careful pace. Maybe that's the point, he said gently. Maybe this is you, just without the noise. Something about that sentence landed deeper than it should have. Without the noise. No schedules. No expectations. No ring. Just breath. And want. And the terrifying freedom of choice. He came closer, still giving me space but stealing the air between us just by existing in it. I can leave, he said, voice low. Say the word. I didn't. Instead, I looked at him. Really looked. There was no smugness. No arrogance. Just a quiet intensity, like he knew exactly how rare this moment was, and how dangerous. When his hand lifted, slowly, reverently, and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, my whole body responded like it had been waiting for that single act for years. Not hunger. Not lust. Permission. His fingers barely touched me, but it was enough. Enough to unravel something I thought was untouchable. And when he whispered, "Tell me when to stop," I closed the space between us. And whispered back, "Not yet." Time didn't move the way it should have after that. It slowed, then disappeared completely. We weren't kissing yet. Not quite. But his breath was on my cheek, and my hands had found their way to the collar of his shirt, fingers curling into fabric like it could anchor me. Every part of me was trembling, but not from fear. It was something older, deeper. Like waking up after years of being numb. When our lips finally met, it wasn't rushed. It was quiet. Like a question answered too late. He kissed me like he wasn't trying to take anything. Only recognized something I'd forgotten was mine. There was no room for thought. Just heat. Soft pressure. The sound of breath catching, of fabric shifting as hands wandered without needing directions. My back found the wall. His body found mine, carefully, not trapping, just surrounding. And I let it. Because for the first time in years I wanted to be held like that. Not because someone needed me, but because someone saw me. His hands traced my waist like he was memorizing, not claiming. My skin lit up wherever he touched, like it remembered this language even when I didn't. The red light from the hallway still slipped beneath the crack in the door, casting everything in that faint, forbidden glow. It felt like we weren't in a hotel room at all, but some in-between place, where choices hung in the air like thunder before it breaks. He whispered my name once, and it sounded like an apology and a prayer in the same breath. I didn't answer. I just pulled him closer. And when his mouth moved to my neck, soft and searching, a sound escaped my throat that didn't belong to the woman who usually made grocery lists in bed. The woman with the ring. That version of me was gone now. Not forever, maybe. But for this night. She didn't belong here. Here there was only heat. And the slow, deliberate way we began to fall into each other, like we'd been there before in some other life. And this was us finally finding the place we'd never admitted we needed. Somewhere between the buttons he unfastened and the breath he stole from my collarbone, I stopped thinking in full sentences. Everything became sensation. The quiet slide of silk falling off my shoulder. The way his hands paused, just for a second, like asking permission without words. The look in his eyes when he saw all the parts of me I usually keep hidden. Not just skin but softness, fear, want. He touched me like he was reading me. Not devouring, discovering. And I let him. Because the kind of ache I carried couldn't be eased with words or reason. It lived deeper. In the places I'd kept locked for years. His mouth found the curve of my shoulder, then lower, following the quiet gasps I couldn't swallow. My hands tangled in his hair without thinking, holding on like I might lose myself entirely, and wanting to. The wall was cool against my back. He was warm everywhere else. I never realized how loud silence could be. How it could speak louder than any name, any promise. Just the rustle of sheets, the hitch of breath, the creak of the bed beneath the weight of choice. He whispered something then. Something I'll never forget. You don't owe me anything. You don't have to disappear after this. And that nearly broke me. Because I wanted to disappear. And I didn't. All at once. I wanted to be held and remembered. I wanted to be forgotten and forgiven. I wanted to be the woman who took off her ring and meant it. And the one who might put it back on but never be the same. When his lips met the center of my chest, right where my heart was trying to outrun itself, I felt something dissolve. Not guilt. Not yet. But the version of me that said I didn't deserve this. She slipped quietly out of the room. And I stayed. We never turned on the lights. Even hours later, when our bodies had settled into the quiet tangle of something between sleep and surrender, the room stayed dim. Like the night hadn't ended, only softened. I lay there beside him, his arm draped lightly over my waist, his breath steady against my shoulder. I should have felt ashamed, or afraid, or some flavor of regret I could name and carry back into my real life. But I didn't. I felt real. Like the mask I wore every day had finally slipped, and beneath it was someone I actually missed. His fingers traced lazy, thoughtless circles on my hip. Not possessive. Not urgent. Just there grounding me. I turned to look at him. He was already watching me. Do you feel different? He asked softly, voice still thick from sleep. I nodded. Everything feels different. Even the air. He smiled at that. Pressed his forehead to mine. Said nothing for a long time. And in that stillness I realized something strange. I didn't want to ask about his life. Not really. Not who he was outside this room or what he'd want from me tomorrow. Because this wasn't about tomorrow. It was about this. This night. This version of me. This beautiful, dangerous pause in the middle of a life I'd outgrown but was too afraid to leave. Eventually I sat up. The sheet slipped down my back, cool against my skin. I reached for my clutch, fingers brushing the inside pocket. And there it was. The ring. Still warm from the heat it had absorbed all night. Like it had been listening. Waiting. I stared at it for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. This wasn't his decision. It never was. I didn't put it on. But I didn't leave it behind either. I stood. Found my dress. Slipped it over skin that now felt electric, alive. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who wasn't pretending anymore. Not a wife. Not a stranger. Not even a mistress. Just me. For the first time in years. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing to explain. No promises to make. No versions of the truth that would hold outside that room. I walked to the door slowly, heels in hand, hair still wild from the night. He sat on the edge of the bed watching me, not asking me to stay, not stopping me either. Just seeing me. I hope you remember how you felt tonight, he said. Not what we did. Not who we were. How I felt. And that stayed with me. The hallway was empty when I stepped out, but my heart wasn't. It was full, not with him, but with something I hadn't carried in years. Myself. Not the polished version, or the exhausted one with carpool in the morning and dinner in the oven by 5, but the woman who chose. Who had looked in a mirror and taken off her ring, not out of hate or revenge, but hunger. Hunger to feel something real. To remember who she was before she became everyone else's everything. The elevator ride down was silent. I stared at my reflection in the golden doors. Same face. Same eyes. But softer now. Wiser. Lit from somewhere inside. At the lobby, the world didn't stop or notice. And maybe that's what made it feel even more powerful. I slipped the ring back onto my finger. Not because I was erasing the night, but because I'd finally reclaimed the woman beneath it. It was never really about him. It was about me. And the night I finally remembered that I was still alive underneath the quiet. That I could still be wanted. Still want. And that sometimes the most dangerous thing a woman can do is come back to herself. I didn't cheat that night. I chose myself. And I still wear the ring, but I never see it the same.